Maria Elena pressed her hand against the cold stone wall of the village church, her breath coming in short gasps. The morning sickness had been getting worse each day, and she could no longer hide what everyone in the small Spanish village already suspected. At 19, she was unmarried and carrying a child that would bring shame to her family's name. The heavy wooden doors of the church creaked open behind her. Father Rodriguez emerged, his weathered face showing the same disappointment she had seen in her father's eyes 3 days ago, when she finally told him the truth. The priest had been kind, offering prayers and guidance, but even his gentle words could not change the harsh reality of her situation. "Maria Elena," he said softly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Have you given more thought to what we discussed?" She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. They both knew what he meant. The convent in the neighboring town would take her in, allow her to have the child in secret, and then the baby would be given to a family who could provide properly. She would return home after a few months, and life would continue as if nothing had happened. But the thought of giving away her child made her stomach turn in ways that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Every night she would place her hands on her still small belly and whisper promises to the life growing inside her. She had already begun to love this baby fiercely, despite the circumstances of its creation. Her father, Vicente Morales, owned a small farm on the outskirts of the village. He was a proud man who had worked his entire life to build a respectable reputation. When Maria Elena told him about the pregnancy, his face had turned red with anger and shame. He had not spoken to her since, communicating only through her younger brother Carlos when absolutely necessary. The father of her child was nowhere to be found. Eduardo had been a traveling merchant who had stayed in their village for 2 weeks during the harvest festival. He had been charming and handsome, full of stories about distant cities and promises of adventure. Maria Elena had been swept away by his attention, believing his whispered words of love and his promises to return for her. That had been 4 months ago. Eduardo had left the village the morning after the festival ended, and no one had seen him since. Some of the older women in the village whispered that they had seen his type before, men who moved from town to town, leaving broken hearts and sometimes broken families in their wake. Maria Elena's mother, Carmen, had died when she was 12, leaving her to care for her father and brother. She had learned to cook, clean, and manage the household while other girls her age were still playing with dolls. The responsibility had made her mature beyond her years, but it had also left her hungry for the kind of romance and excitement that Eduardo had seemed to offer. Now, as she stood outside the church with Father Rodriguez, she felt more alone than ever. Her best friend Isabella had stopped visiting after the news of the pregnancy spread through the village. The other young women would fall silent when she passed by, then resume their conversations in hushed whispers once they thought she was out of earshot. The village itself was small and isolated, nestled in a valley between rolling hills covered with olive groves and wheat fields. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and gossip traveled faster than the wind that swept down from the mountains. Maria Elena's situation had become the talk of every household, discussed over dinner tables and shared during morning visits to the market. Her brother Carlos, just 16 years old, had been the only family member to show her any kindness. He would bring her food when their father refused to let her eat at the family table, and he had even offered to speak to their father on her behalf. But Carlos was still young and dependent on their father's support. Maria Elena knew she could not ask him to choose between her and the man who controlled their family's future. The financial situation made everything worse. Her father's farm barely provided enough income to support the family as it was. The idea of another mouth to feed, especially a child born out of wedlock, was more than he was willing to accept. He had made it clear that if she chose to keep the baby, she would have to find another place to live and another way to support herself. But where could a young, unmarried woman with no education and no money go? The options for women in her situation were limited and bleak. She could try to find work as a servant in one of the larger towns, but who would hire a pregnant woman? She could attempt to make a living as a seamstress or laundress, but those jobs paid very little and would be impossible to manage with a newborn baby. As she walked slowly through the village streets, Maria Elena noticed the blacksmith shop ahead. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could hear the rhythmic sound of hammer striking metal. Diego Herrera had been the village blacksmith for as long as anyone could remember. He was a quiet man in his 30s who kept mostly to himself, known for his skilled craftsmanship and his fair prices. She had always noticed him, though she had never spoken to him beyond polite greetings. There was something steady and reliable about him that stood in sharp contrast to the flashy charm that had attracted her to Eduardo. Diego was not handsome in the conventional sense. His face was marked by years of working near the forge, and his hands were permanently stained by soot and metal. But there was a kindness in his dark eyes that she had always found comforting. As she passed by his shop, their eyes met through the open doorway. Instead of the judgment or pity she had grown accustomed to seeing in people's faces, she saw something different in his expression. It was compassion, mixed with something that looked almost like protective concern. Diego nodded respectfully and continued his work. But Maria Elena found herself slowing her steps, drawn by the warmth emanating from the forge and the sense of sanctuary it seemed to offer. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small spark of something that might have been hope, though she could not yet understand why. 3 weeks had passed since Maria Elena's encounter with Father Rodriguez outside the church, and her situation had grown more desperate with each passing day. Her father's silence had turned into open hostility, and she could feel the weight of the entire village's judgment pressing down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. The morning sickness had finally begun to subside, but in its place came a different kind of discomfort. Her clothes were becoming tight around her waist, and soon it would be impossible to hide her condition from anyone who looked closely. The thought of facing the market, vendors and village women with her pregnancy, visible to all, made her stomach clench with anxiety. She had been forced to take on additional work to earn money for herself and the coming baby. Maria Elena spent her mornings helping Senora Martinez, an elderly widow who lived alone on the other side of the village. The work was hard, scrubbing floors, washing clothes by hand, and tending to a small vegetable garden. But Senora Martinez paid her a few coins each week and never asked uncomfortable questions about her situation. In the afternoons, she would walk to the outskirts of town where she picked wild herbs and flowers that she could sell to the village women for cooking and medicine. The work kept her hands busy and gave her time to think, though her thoughts often led her in circles of worry and fear. It was during one of these afternoon walks that she encountered Diego Herrera, away from his forge for the first time. She had been kneeling beside a stream, washing the dirt from a bundle of mint leaves when she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw the blacksmith walking toward her, carrying a large metal bucket. "Good afternoon, Maria Elena," he said quietly, his voice carrying the same gentle tone she remembered from their brief encounters in the village. "Good afternoon, Señor Herrera," she replied, suddenly aware of how she must look with her hair falling loose from its braid and her skirts damp from kneeling by the water. Diego knelt beside the stream a few feet away from her and began filling his bucket with water. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but Maria Elena felt compelled to explain her presence. "I come here to collect herbs," she said, holding up the bundle of mint. "Senora Garcia pays well for fresh mint and it helps with cooking." "It's good land here," Diego replied, gesturing toward the fertile area around the stream. "My mother used to bring me here when I was young to gather plants for healing remedies. She knew which ones could help with fever, which ones eased pain." Maria Elena looked at him with surprise. She had never heard Diego speak so many words at once, and she had never known about his mother's knowledge of healing plants. Most people in the village only knew him as the quiet blacksmith who could repair anything made of metal. "Is your mother still living?" she asked gently. Diego's expression grew sad and he shook his head. "She died when I was 22. A fever that the herbs couldn't cure." He paused, then added, "She would have liked you, I think. She always said that people who were kind to plants and animals had good hearts." The compliment, simple as it was, brought unexpected tears to Maria Elena's eyes. It had been so long since anyone had said anything kind about her character. In recent weeks, she had begun to wonder if she was truly as shameful and worthless as her father's treatment suggested. "Are you well?" Diego asked, noticing her emotional response. His dark eyes showed genuine concern, not the curiosity or judgment she was used to seeing. For a moment, Maria Elena considered telling him everything, about the baby, about her father's rejection, about her fears for the future, but the words stuck in her throat. She could not bear to see his expression change from kindness to disappointment or disgust. "I am managing," she said instead, which was both true and completely inadequate to describe her situation. Diego nodded as if he understood that there was more to the story, but respected her privacy too much to press for details. He finished filling his bucket and stood up, but instead of leaving immediately, he hesitated. "Maria Elena," he said carefully, "if you ever need anything, help with work, or just someone to talk to who won't judge, you know where to find me." The offer was simple, but it hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had offered to help her, without expecting anything in return? Even Senora Martinez, kind as she was, paid her for her work. Father Rodriguez offered guidance, but it came with expectations about what she should do with her life. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to trust her voice to remain steady if she spoke louder. After Diego left, Maria Elena remained by the stream for a long time, thinking about their conversation. There had been something different about the way he spoke to her, not as a fallen woman or a source of village gossip, but as a person worthy of respect and kindness. That evening, she returned home to find her father waiting for her in the kitchen. His face was stern, and she could tell immediately that something had happened. "I spoke with Father Rodriguez today," Vicente said without preamble. "He says you have not given him an answer about the convent." Maria Elena set down her basket of herbs and faced her father. "I am still thinking about it," she said. "There is nothing to think about," her father replied harshly. "You will go to the convent next week. The arrangements have been made." The finality in his voice made her heart race with panic. "Papa, please." "Let me stay. I can work. I can contribute to the household. The baby doesn't have to be a burden." Vicente's face grew even harder. "You should have thought about that before you brought this shame on our family. I will not have a bastard grandchild living under my roof. And I will not have the entire village talking about the Morales family's disgrace." "But where will I go after the baby is born?" Maria Elena asked desperately. "What will happen to me?" Her father shrugged coldly. "That is not my concern. You made your choice when you lay with that merchant. Now you must live with the consequences." That night, Maria Elena lay in her small bed staring at the ceiling and fighting back tears. In 1 week, she would be taken to the convent where she would be hidden away like a shameful secret. Her baby would be born and immediately taken from her arms to be given to strangers. She would return to the village eventually, but as what? A broken woman with no future and no hope? For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Maria Elena began to seriously consider running away. But where could she go with no money, no connections, and no skills beyond household work? The world beyond her village seemed vast and terrifying, full of dangers she could not even imagine. As she drifted toward an uneasy sleep, she found herself thinking again about Diego's offer of help. Could she possibly ask such a thing of him? Could she burden a kind man with her problems when he had already shown her more compassion than her own family? The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching Maria Elena's mood as she realized she had only 6 days left before being sent to the convent. She had barely slept, spending most of the night trying to think of any possible way to avoid the fate her father had decided for her. Every option seemed impossible. She had no money, no place to go, and no way to support herself and a baby. She was hanging laundry behind Senora Martinez's house when she heard familiar footsteps approaching. Turning around, she saw Diego Herrera walking toward her, carrying a small cloth bundle in his hands. "Good morning, Maria Elena," he said, his voice gentle as always. "Senora Martinez told me I might find you here." Her heart began to race. Had someone told him about her situation? Was he here to offer the same advice as everyone else, that she should accept her fate and give up her child? "I brought you something," Diego continued, holding out the bundle. "My mother's journal. She wrote down everything she knew about healing plants, and I thought you might find it useful since you're collecting herbs." Maria Elena accepted the bundle with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Inside the cloth was a small leather-bound book filled with pages of careful handwriting. She could see sketches of plants, detailed notes about their properties, and recipes for various remedies. "This is too valuable," she protested. "I can't accept such a precious thing." "My mother would want it to be used by someone who appreciates plants and healing," Diego replied. "Besides, I've already copied the most important remedies into my own notes." As she leafed through the pages, Maria Elena felt tears building in her eyes again. The journal represented years of careful observation and learning, passed down from a mother to her son, and now being shared with her. It was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given her. "Thank you," she whispered. This means more to me than you can know. Diego studied her face carefully, and she could see that he was debating whether to say something more. Finally, he spoke in a voice so quiet she had to lean forward to hear him. Maria Elena, I know it's not my place to ask, but are you in some kind of trouble? The direct question caught her off guard. She had been so careful to hide her situation, but apparently not careful enough to fool someone who was truly paying attention. Why do you ask? She said, trying to keep her voice steady. I've noticed that you're always alone now. Your friend Isabella doesn't visit anymore, and your father. Diego paused, choosing his words carefully. I've heard him speaking to other men in the village, and his voice sounds angry when he mentions you. Maria Elena closed her eyes, knowing that she could no longer pretend everything was normal. The truth was going to come out eventually, and perhaps it would be better coming from her own lips rather than from village gossip. I'm going to have a baby, she said quietly, the words feeling strange and frightening spoken aloud to someone outside her family. Diego's expression didn't change, which surprised her. She had expected shock, disappointment, or judgment, but his face remained calm and thoughtful. And the father? He asked simply. Gone. He was a traveling merchant who left months ago. I don't even know his real name or where he came from. Diego nodded slowly as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. And your family? My father is sending me to a convent next week. I'll have the baby there, and then it will be given away to another family. Her voice broke on the last words, and she had to take a deep breath before continuing. Everyone says it's the best solution, the only way to preserve what's left of my reputation. And what do you want? Diego asked. The question was so simple, yet no one else had bothered to ask it. Everyone, her father, Father Rodriguez, even the village women who whispered about her situation, had assumed they knew what was best for her without ever asking what she herself wanted. I want to keep my baby, she said, the words coming out stronger than she had expected. I know it sounds foolish, and I know I have no way to support us, but I love this child already. The thought of giving it away makes me feel like I'm dying inside. Diego was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground while he considered her words. When he looked up, there was a determination in his eyes that she had never seen before. There might be another way, he said slowly. What do you mean? Marry me. The words hung in the air between them like something physical. Maria Elena stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. What did you say? I said marry me, Diego repeated, his voice growing stronger. It would solve your immediate problems. You would have a husband and a home for you and the baby. No one could force you to give up your child. Maria Elena's mind reeled. But Diego, you don't understand. The baby isn't yours. Everyone in the village knows that. They know about Eduardo and what happened. I know exactly what I'm offering, Diego replied calmly. I'm offering to be a father to a child who needs one, and a husband to a woman who deserves better than what she's been given. But why? Maria Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why would you do such a thing for me? Diego's cheeks reddened slightly, and he looked down at his hands. Because I've been watching you for years, Maria Elena. I've seen how kind you are to everyone, even people who don't deserve it. I've seen how hard you work and how much you care about others. When your mother died, you took care of your whole family without complaint. You've never been anything but good and decent, and now everyone is treating you like you're worthless because of one mistake. He paused, then looked directly into her eyes. And because I care about you, I have for a long time, though I never thought I had any right to say so. Maria Elena felt her world shifting around her. Diego Herrera, the quiet blacksmith she had barely spoken to, was offering to completely change his life to save her and her unborn child. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. But what about love? She asked. Don't you want to marry someone you love? Someone who loves you back? Diego's smile was sad but genuine. I think love can grow between people who respect and care for each other. And I think a marriage based on kindness and commitment might be stronger than one based only on passion. Maria Elena thought about Eduardo and his passionate declarations of love that had proven to be nothing more than empty words. Then she thought about Diego's steady presence, his gentle kindness, and his willingness to sacrifice his own future for her welfare. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Diego replied, but don't take too long. If you're really going to the convent next week, we would need to act quickly. As he walked away, Maria Elena remained in Senora Martinez's garden, clutching his mother's journal and trying to process what had just happened. Could she really accept such an offer? Was it fair to Diego to marry him when she could not promise to love him the way a wife should love a husband? And yet what choice did she have if she wanted to keep her baby? Maria Elena spent the next 2 days in a state of constant internal turmoil. Diego's proposal had opened a door she never knew existed, but walking through it would mean making a choice that would affect not just her own life, but the lives of her unborn child and a good man who deserved more than a marriage of convenience. She found herself watching Diego from a distance as he worked in his forge, trying to imagine what life would be like as his wife. He was a skilled craftsman who earned a steady living, and his small house behind the blacksmith shop was well maintained and comfortable. More importantly, he was known throughout the village as an honest, reliable man who kept his word and treated everyone with respect. But could she be a good wife to him? She knew nothing about being married, and even less about running a household for a husband who was not family. The thought of sharing a bed with Diego made her face burn with embarrassment. She had shared Eduardo's bed only a few times, and those encounters had been driven by passion and the excitement of forbidden romance. How different would it be with a husband she respected but did not love? On the 3rd day after Diego's proposal, Maria Elena made her decision. She could not bear the thought of giving up her baby, and she could not see any other path that would allow her to keep the child. If Diego was truly willing to make such a sacrifice for her, she owed it to both of them to try to make the marriage work. She found him at his forge that evening, working on a set of horseshoes by the light of the fire. The glow from the flames cast dancing shadows across his face, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly look at him. He was not handsome in the way Eduardo had been, but there was something appealing about his steady concentration and the confident way he handled his tools. "Diego," she called softly from the doorway. He looked up immediately, setting down his hammer. "Maria Elena, have you made your decision?" "Yes," she said, stepping into the warm workshop. "If you're truly certain about your offer, then I accept." Diego's face showed relief mixed with something that might have been joy. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured into this." "I'm sure," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "But I need you to understand something. I can promise to be a good wife to you, to cook and clean and manage your household. I can promise to respect you and be faithful to you. But I cannot promise to love you, at least not right away." Diego nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. I'm not asking for love immediately. I'm asking for a chance to earn it over time. And you understand that this baby will not be yours by blood?" "The baby will be mine by choice," Diego replied firmly. "That's what matters." His certainty helped calm some of Maria Elena's fears. "What do we do now?" "We speak to Father Rodriguez tomorrow. If we're going to do this, it needs to be done quickly and properly. Your father is planning to send you away in 3 days." The next morning, Maria Elena and Diego walked together to the church. Father Rodriguez was surprised to see them, and even more surprised when Diego explained their request to be married as soon as possible. "This is very sudden," the priest said, looking between them with concern. "Diego, you understand the situation? You understand that Maria Elena is expecting a child?" "I understand everything," Diego replied calmly. "And I still want to marry her." Father Rodriguez studied Diego's face for a long moment, then turned to Maria Elena. "My child, is this what you truly want? You're not being forced into this decision." "No one is forcing me, Father," Maria Elena said. "Diego has offered me a choice, and I'm grateful for it." The priest was quiet for several minutes, clearly wrestling with the unusual nature of the request. Finally, he spoke. "Very well. I can perform the ceremony tomorrow evening, after the regular evening prayers. But first I must speak with your father, Diego, and Maria Elena, you must tell your family about this decision." Walking home from the church, Maria Elena felt as if she were living in a dream. In less than 24 hours, she would be married to a man she barely knew, but who was willing to save her from a fate that terrified her. "Are you having second thoughts?" Diego asked, noticing her quiet mood. "Not about marrying you," she replied honestly, "but I'm worried about how my father will react. He's going to be very angry." Her prediction proved accurate. When she arrived home and told her father about her engagement to Diego, Vicente's face turned purple with rage. "You stupid girl," he shouted. "Do you think marrying the blacksmith will make people forget what you've done? Do you think it will erase the shame you've brought on this family? It will give my baby a name and a father, Maria Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Isn't that better than the alternative? The alternative was to handle this quietly and properly, her father snapped. Now everyone will know that Diego Herrera was willing to marry a whore. They'll count the months between your wedding and the baby's birth. And they'll all know the truth. The cruel word hit Maria Elena like a physical blow, but she forced herself to stand straight and meet her father's eyes. If that's what you think of me, then perhaps it's better that I leave this house. Carlos, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. Papa, that's enough. Maria Elena is still your daughter, and she's found an honorable solution to her problem. Stay out of this. Boy, Vicente warned. No, Carlos replied, his young voice stronger than Maria Elena had ever heard it. Diego Herrera is a good man. If he's willing to marry Maria Elena and take care of her and the baby, then we should be grateful, not angry. Vicente looked between his children, his face showing a mixture of fury and disappointment. Fine, marry your blacksmith if you want, but don't expect me to attend the wedding. And don't expect to be welcomed back in this house as if nothing has happened. That evening, Maria Elena packed her few belongings into a small wooden chest that had belonged to her mother. She owned very little, a few dresses, some undergarments, her mother's rosary, and now Diego's mother's journal. It seemed like a meager foundation for starting a new life. Carlos helped her carry the chest to Diego's house after dark, not wanting to attract the attention of the village gossips. Diego welcomed them both warmly and showed Maria Elena to a small room that would be hers until after the wedding. Tomorrow night, this will all be different, Diego said quietly as Carlos prepared to leave. Are you ready? Maria Elena looked around the modest but clean house that would soon be her home. Through the window, she could see the forge where Diego worked, and beyond that, the hills where she had collected herbs and dreamed of a different future. I'm ready, she said, and for the first time in months she actually meant it. As she settled into the unfamiliar bed that night, Maria Elena placed her hands on her belly and whispered to her unborn child, Tomorrow, little one, you'll have a father. Maybe not the one I imagined, but a good one who will love and protect you. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she fell asleep without crying. The morning of her wedding dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself was offering encouragement for the new beginning Maria Elena was about to make. She woke early in Diego's spare room, her stomach fluttering with nervousness that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Senora Martinez arrived just after breakfast, carrying a bundle wrapped in white cloth. The elderly woman had become an unexpected ally, offering to help Maria Elena prepare for the ceremony when it became clear that her own family would not be participating in the celebration. I brought you something, Senora Martinez said with a gentle smile, unwrapping the bundle to reveal a beautiful white dress. This was my daughter's wedding dress. She died in childbirth 15 years ago, and I've been keeping it, hoping someday it might bring happiness to another bride. Maria Elena gasped as she saw the dress. It was simple but elegant, made of fine cotton with delicate embroidery around the neckline and sleeves. It was the most beautiful garment she had ever seen, let alone worn. I can't accept something so precious, she protested, but Senora Martinez waved away her objections. My daughter would want it to be worn by a bride who needs it, the older woman said firmly. Besides, you're going to be Diego's wife, and Diego is like a son to me. His own mother would have wanted to help you prepare if she were still alive. As Senora Martinez helped her into the dress, Maria Elena learned more about Diego's past. His mother had indeed been known for her healing knowledge, and she had been one of Senora Martinez's closest friends. Diego had grown up spending almost as much time in Senora Martinez's kitchen as his own, especially after his father died when Diego was just 14. He's a good man, Senora Martinez said as she arranged Maria Elena's hair. Quiet but good. He'll take care of you and the baby. But what if I can't make him happy? Maria Elena asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her all morning. What if I'm not the wife he deserves? Senora Martinez paused in her work and met Maria Elena's eyes in the small mirror they were using. Happiness in marriage isn't something that happens automatically, child. It's something you build together day by day through kindness and patience, and choosing to care for each other even when it's difficult. The words reminded Maria Elena of what Diego had said about love growing between people who respected and cared for each other. Maybe the foundation for a good marriage didn't have to be passionate love. Maybe it could be built on something steadier and more reliable. In the early afternoon, Carlos arrived at Diego's house. Maria Elena was surprised and touched to see her younger brother, dressed in his best clothes and carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. "I know Papa won't come," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I wanted to be here for you. And I brought these from the field where you used to take me to collect herbs when I was little." The simple bouquet of daisies and lavender brought tears to Maria Elena's eyes. It meant more to her than the most expensive flowers could have, because it represented the love and support of the one family member who had not abandoned her. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "Having you here makes everything feel right." Diego appeared in his best clothes just before it was time to leave for the church. Maria Elena had never seen him dressed up before, and she was struck by how handsome he looked when he wasn't covered in soot from the forge. He had clearly taken great care with his appearance, and when he saw her in the wedding dress, his face lit up with genuine admiration. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincere way he said it made her feel beautiful for the first time in months. The ceremony was small and quiet. Besides Maria Elena, Diego, Carlos, and Señora Martinez, only Father Rodriguez and his altar boy were present. A few curious villagers had gathered outside the church, drawn by the unusual timing of the wedding and the gossip surrounding the bride, but they were kept at a respectful distance. Father Rodriguez performed the ceremony with dignity and grace, treating the occasion with the same solemnity he would give to any wedding. When he asked if there were any objections to the union, the church remained silent. When he asked Diego if he would take Maria Elena as his wife, Diego's "I will" was clear and confident. When it was Maria Elena's turn to speak her vows, she found herself looking directly into Diego's eyes. What she saw there gave her strength. Not passion or romantic love, but something deeper and more reliable. She saw commitment, kindness, and a determination to make their unusual marriage work. "I will," she said, and meant it completely. When Father Rodriguez pronounced them husband and wife, Diego leaned forward to kiss her cheek gently. It was a respectful, tender gesture that acknowledged both the formality of their union and the reality that they were still virtual strangers to each other. After the ceremony, Señora Martinez had prepared a simple meal at Diego's house, now Maria Elena's home as well. The four of them shared bread, cheese, wine, and the cake that Señora Martinez had baked that morning. It was not the wedding celebration Maria Elena had dreamed of as a young girl, but it was filled with genuine warmth and care. As the sun began to set, Carlos and Señora Martinez prepared to leave the newlyweds alone. Carlos hugged his sister tightly, whispering in her ear that he would visit often and that he was proud of her courage. Señora Martinez kissed both Maria Elena and Diego on the cheek, then pressed a small wrapped package into Maria Elena's hands. "Open it later," she said with a knowing smile. When they were finally alone, Maria Elena and Diego stood in the main room of their house, suddenly awkward with each other. The reality of their situation was settling in. They were married, but they were also strangers who would now be sharing a home and a life together. "Are you tired?" Diego asked gently. "It's been a long day." Maria Elena nodded, grateful for his consideration. "I think I'd like to rest for a while." "Of course. I'll be in the workshop for a few hours, finishing up some work. Take all the time you need to settle in." His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. Many men would have expected their new wives to immediately take over all the household duties. But Diego seemed to understand that she needed time to adjust to her new circumstances. After he left for the workshop, Maria Elena explored her new home more thoroughly. It was larger than her father's house, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, 2 bedrooms, and a small storage room. Everything was clean and well-maintained, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. The walls were bare except for a few tools, and the furniture was practical but sparse. She unpacked her few belongings in what was now their bedroom, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe next to Diego's clothes. The intimacy of seeing their garments side by side brought home the reality of her situation more than the wedding ceremony had. Finally, she remembered Señora Martinez's package. Inside the wrapping, she found a small wooden box containing a set of delicate lace curtains and a note written in the older woman's careful handwriting. "Every home needs beauty as well as function." These belonged to Diego's mother, She would want you to have them. The gesture brought tears to her eyes. Senora Martinez had found a way to connect her to Diego's past and to make her feel truly welcome in her new home. She immediately hung the curtains in the bedroom window, and the soft fabric transformed the austere room into something more welcoming and feminine. When Diego returned from the workshop several hours later, he paused in the doorway of the bedroom, noticing the change immediately. "My mother's curtains," he said softly. "I haven't seen them hung since she died. They look beautiful. Senora Martinez gave them to me. I hope you don't mind that I put them up." "I don't mind at all. This is your home now, too. You should make it feel like home." They shared a simple dinner of bread, cheese, and vegetables from Diego's small garden. The conversation was tentative at first, but gradually became more comfortable as they talked about practical matters, how they would manage the household expenses, what Maria Elena's daily routine would be like, how they would handle the gossip that was sure to follow their sudden marriage. "I know people will talk," Diego said as they cleaned up after the meal. "They'll count the months and whisper about why we married so quickly. But I want you to know that I don't care what they say. As far as I'm concerned, you're my wife and this baby will be my child, and that's all that matters." His words provided comfort that Maria Elena desperately needed. The thought of facing the village women and their whispered comments had been one of her greatest fears about staying in the community. "What do we tell people when they ask directly?" she asked. "We tell them the truth, that we fell in love and decided to marry quickly. It's not uncommon for couples to have short engagements when they're certain of their feelings." Maria Elena appreciated his practical approach to their situation. He was right that quick marriages were not unheard of, especially in small communities where everyone already knew each other well. As the evening grew late, they faced the awkward question of sleeping arrangements. They had not discussed this aspect of their marriage, and Maria Elena felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment as Diego tactfully addressed the subject. "I can sleep in the workshop tonight," he offered. "There's a small cot there that I sometimes use when I'm working late." "We don't have to. That is, we can take our time with the more intimate aspects of marriage." His consideration and respect for her feelings made Maria Elena's heart swell with gratitude. Eduardo had been passionate but selfish, taking what he wanted without much thought for her comfort or readiness. Diego's gentle approach was a revelation. "Thank you," she whispered. "I think that would be best, at least for now." Diego nodded and gathered some blankets from a chest in the corner. Before he left for the workshop, he paused at the bedroom door. "Maria Elena," he said quietly, "I want you to know that I'm going to do everything I can to make you happy. I know this isn't the marriage you dreamed of, but I hope that in time, it can become something good for both of us." After he left, Maria Elena changed into her nightgown and climbed into the bed that was now hers. The sheets smelled faintly of the herbs that Diego's mother had used to scent the linens, and the scent was somehow comforting. As she lay in the darkness, one hand resting on her growing belly, Maria Elena reflected on the extraordinary day she had just experienced. This morning she had been a disgraced unmarried woman facing the prospect of losing her child. Tonight she was a married woman with a home, a husband who respected her and hoped for the future. It was not the romantic love story she had once imagined, but perhaps it was something better, a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine care. Only time would tell if love would grow between them, but for the first time in months, Maria Elena fell asleep feeling safe and protected. 6 months had passed since Maria Elena became Diego's wife, and the autumn morning brought news that would change everything once again. She stood in the doorway of the blacksmith shop, watching her husband work at the forge while she cradled their newborn daughter in her arms. Little Isabella had been born 3 weeks earlier, a healthy baby with dark hair and bright eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. The birth had been difficult but safe, attended by the village midwife and Senora Martinez, who had become like a mother to both Maria Elena and Diego. "She has your eyes," Diego had said when he first held the baby, and Maria Elena had been struck by how naturally the words "your eyes" came to him. From the moment Isabella was born, Diego had claimed her as completely his own daughter, never once referring to her as anything other than his child. The village gossips had indeed counted the months between the wedding and the birth, but Diego's steady presence and obvious devotion to both his wife and daughter had gradually worn down much of the harsh judgment. People began to speak of him with increased respect, calling him a man of honor who had done the right thing by Maria Elena and her child. Maria Elena's relationship with Diego had grown stronger with each passing day. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had slowly transformed into something deeper and more meaningful. They had learned each other's habits and preferences, discovered shared interests in books and music, and built a comfortable domestic routine that felt natural and peaceful. The physical intimacy of marriage had developed gradually and gently. Diego had never pressured her, allowing their relationship to progress at her own pace. When they finally became husband and wife in every sense, it had felt right and natural, born of growing affection and trust rather than desperate passion. 3 months after Isabella's birth, Maria Elena realized she was pregnant again. This time, the news brought joy rather than fear. Diego's face had lit up with genuine happiness when she told him, and he had immediately begun making plans to expand their small house to accommodate their growing family. But this morning brought unexpected visitors who would test the strength of the new life they had built together. Maria Elena was preparing breakfast when she heard voices outside the house. Through the window, she saw 2 men on horseback speaking with Diego. One was a stranger, well-dressed and clearly from a larger town or city. The other was someone she recognized with a shock of disbelief that made her hands tremble. Eduardo, the man who had fathered Isabella, who had filled her head with promises of love and adventure, who had disappeared without a word, was standing in front of her house talking to her husband. Diego's posture was tense, his arms crossed over his chest in a defensive stance. Maria Elena could not hear the conversation from inside the house, but she could see that it was not friendly. Eduardo was gesturing toward the house, his voice raised, while Diego remained still and unmoved. After several minutes, Diego turned and walked toward the house. Maria Elena quickly moved away from the window, her heart racing with panic. What did Eduardo want? Why had he come back now just when her life had finally found peace and stability? Diego entered the house, his face grim but determined. "Maria Elena," he said quietly, "there are some men outside who want to speak with you. You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to." "I know who one of them is," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The dark-haired man. That's Eduardo." Diego's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "What do you want to do?" The question reminded Maria Elena of how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been powerless, dependent on the decisions of her father and the priest and anyone else who claimed authority over her fate. Now she had a husband who asked for her opinion, who respected her right to make choices about her own life. "I want to know what he wants," she said, surprising herself with her own courage. "But I want you there with me when I talk to him." Diego nodded. "Of course. We'll face this together." They walked outside together, Diego's protective presence giving Maria Elena the strength she needed. Eduardo looked older than she remembered, his face showing the wear of hard traveling and perhaps hard living. The well-dressed man with him appeared to be some kind of legal representative. "Maria Elena," Eduardo said, his voice carrying the same charm that had once swept her off her feet. But now it sounded hollow and calculating rather than romantic. "You look well. Married life agrees with you." "What do you want, Eduardo?" she asked directly, refusing to be drawn into pleasantries. "I've come for my daughter," he said simply. "I have the legal right to claim her as my child and take her with me." The words hit Maria Elena like a physical blow. She felt Diego's hand reach out to steady her, his solid presence the only thing keeping her upright. "Isabella is my daughter," Diego said firmly.
"My name is on her baptismal record as her father." The well-dressed stranger stepped forward, pulling out an official-looking document.
"I'm afraid that won't matter if the biological father chooses to claim the child. Senior Eduardo Martinez has recently inherited a substantial estate from his uncle, and he wishes to legitimize his daughter and make her his heir." Maria Elena stared at Eduardo in disbelief. "You left me alone and pregnant. You never sent word, never asked about the child. And now you want to take her away from the only father she's ever known?" Eduardo's expression showed no remorse. "I was establishing my business and securing my future. Now I'm ready to be a father to my daughter. She'll want for nothing. The finest clothes, the best education. Marriage to a man of good family when she comes of age. She has everything she needs right here," Maria Elena replied, her voice growing stronger with anger. "She has parents who love her and a safe, happy home. She has a blacksmith for a father and a disgraced woman for a mother," Eduardo replied coldly. I can give her a nobleman's life. The cruel word sent a flash of rage through Diego. He stepped forward, his blacksmith's muscles tense with barely controlled anger. You will not speak of my wife that way. Your wife? Eduardo laughed bitterly. She was my woman first. The child she carries now. Is that one yours, or do you simply collect other men's bastards? Diego's fist connected with Eduardo's jaw before anyone could react. The merchant stumbled backward, blood trickling from his lip, while his companion reached for a weapon. Stop, Maria Elena commanded, stepping between the men. This won't solve anything. Eduardo wiped the blood from his mouth, his eyes burning with fury. You'll regret that, Blacksmith. I have the law on my side, and I have money to back up my claims. You'll give me my daughter, or I'll take her by force. Over my dead body, Diego replied quietly, but with absolute conviction. The legal representative cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should approach this matter through the proper channels. We'll return tomorrow with the local magistrate to discuss the situation formally. After the men left, Maria Elena and Diego returned to their house, both shaken by the encounter. Isabella was sleeping peacefully in her cradle, unaware that her entire world had just been threatened. He can't really take her, can he? Maria Elena asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. Diego's silence was confirmation enough. In their society, a man's claim to his biological children was strong, especially if that man had money and social position to back up his demands. We'll fight him, Diego said finally. I don't know how, but we'll find a way. Isabella is our daughter, and no court document will change that. As they held each other in the growing darkness, Maria Elena realized that their peaceful life was about to be tested in ways they had never imagined. The ring Diego had offered her had been a symbol of security and protection, but now they would discover whether their love and commitment were strong enough to protect their family from a man who had the law on his side and money to enforce his will. The battle for Isabella's future was about to begin, and Maria Elena knew that this time, she would fight with everything she had to protect the child she had bled to bring into the world, and the man who had offered them both a chance at happiness.